The studio lights blazed down, casting a clinical brightness over the sleek, modern set. The air was thick with anticipation as the cameras zoomed in on the guest of the hour, Karoline Leavitt, the current White House press secretary under President Donald Trump. Facing her was the sharp-tongued liberal TV host Ethan Caldwell, a man known for his combative style and relentless questioning. His show, The People's Voice, was a primetime favorite among left-leaning audiences, infamous for its aggressive takedowns of conservative figures. Tonight, he had every intention of making Leavitt squirm. She, however, sat composed, her posture straight, her face calm. In her late 20s, Karoline was one of the youngest press secretaries in U.S. history. With a reputation for holding her own against even the most hostile media figures, she wasn't one to be easily intimidated. "Welcome to the show, Karoline," Ethan said, his voice carrying a rehearsed politeness. "I appreciate you taking the time to be here." "Thank you, Ethan," she responded with a poised smile. "Happy to be here." Ethan leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he dove straight into his attack. "You've been called a mouthpiece for Trump's so-called war on democracy. Many say you spin his failures as victories, misleading the American people in the process. How do you respond to that?" Karoline chuckled softly. "Well, that's an interesting take, Ethan. I'd say those many you're referring to are the same media elites who spent years pushing false narratives about President Trump. The real question is, why is it a problem when conservatives defend their policies, but it's perfectly fine when the left does it?" Ethan smirked, unfazed. "So you're saying facts don't matter?" "No," she said, meeting his gaze. "I'm saying that context does." The audience murmured. Some nodded in approval, others scoffed. Ethan wasn't pleased. He'd expected her to stumble, maybe fumble a bit. But she was confident, unshaken. He decided to switch tactics. His eyes drifted to the small, gold cross necklace resting just above the collar of her blouse. A thought struck him, a way to knock her off balance. His smirk widened. "That's a lovely necklace you're wearing, Karoline." She instinctively reached up, touching the cross between her fingers. "Thank you," she said, her voice neutral. "I have to ask," Ethan continued, feigning curiosity. "In an administration that claims to represent all Americans, why wear a symbol that alienates millions? I mean, you do understand that not everyone shares your Christian beliefs, right? Isn't it a little exclusionary?" The air in the room changed. A ripple of unease moved through the audience. Some looked intrigued, others exchanged knowing glances. Ethan had thrown down a challenge. Karoline didn't blink. She let the question hang in the air for a moment, the corners of her lips twitching slightly. Then, with a voice as steady as ever, she said, "Why would my faith offend you, Ethan? Unless, of course, it threatens something you believe in." The studio fell silent. Ethan's smirk faltered. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. But Karoline wasn't done. She leaned forward, eyes locked on his, preparing to say something that would leave the entire room speechless. Ethan Caldwell's smirk flickered, but he quickly masked it with a scoff. He leaned back in his chair, tilting his head as if amused. "Threaten what I believe in? Come on, Karoline, let's not be dramatic. I'm simply pointing out that public figures, especially those working in government, should be mindful of the message they send." Karoline didn't flinch. Instead, she clasped her hands together on the table, her expression serene. "Mindful of what message exactly?" she asked, her voice calm but sharp. Ethan gave an exaggerated shrug. "That this administration is not so secretly pushing a Christian nationalist agenda. That it favors one religion over another." He gestured towards the cross. "Symbols matter, Karoline. When you wear that on a national platform, people see it as a statement and endorsement of one faith over the others." The audience murmured again, some nodding in agreement. Karoline, however, remained unfazed. She let Ethan's words settle in the air for a moment before responding. "So let me get this straight," she began. "You believe that by wearing a small gold cross, a deeply personal and spiritual symbol, I'm somehow forcing my faith onto others?" Ethan grinned, sensing an opening. "Well, it's a..." She held up a hand, cutting him off. "Let me finish." The room tensed. Ethan blinked, clearly unused to being interrupted on his own show. Karoline leaned forward slightly, her voice unwavering. "If my wearing a cross is exclusionary, then why is it acceptable when others proudly wear symbols of their beliefs? I see people wearing pride flags on their lapels, feminist slogans on their shirts, Black Lives Matter pins on their bags. No one tells them they're alienating others. No one calls that exclusionary." Ethan opened his mouth, but Karoline was faster. "And you know what? I wouldn't want them to stop. Because freedom means the right to express what you believe without fear of being silenced. But apparently, that right doesn't extend to me because my belief happens to be in Jesus Christ." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Some clapped. Others whispered among themselves. Ethan forced a laugh. Come on, Karoline, this isn't about silencing you. It's about representation. The government shouldn't be endorsing religion. Karoline raised an eyebrow. Who said the government was endorsing anything? I'm not here on behalf of the church, I'm here as a person who happens to be Christian. And last I checked, the First Amendment protects my right to practice my faith however I choose, including wearing a cross. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Ethan was losing control of the conversation and he knew it. His confidence wavered, but he pushed forward. All right, he said, forcing another grin. But let's be real here, this administration does have a history of blending politics with religion. Trump has openly appealed to evangelical voters. Isn't that a little divisive? Karoline tilted her head. Divisive? Or representative? Are you saying that politicians should ignore the millions of Americans who value their faith? Ethan stammered. That's not what I'm saying. Because if that's the case, she continued, cutting him off again, then maybe we should also tell politicians to stop appealing to any specific group. No more addressing unions. No more speaking at historically black colleges. No more events for LGBTQ organizations. After all, we wouldn't want to be divisive, right? A pause. Then applause. Ethan's jaw tightened. He was losing ground fast. Karoline saw it. And she wasn't about to let up. She took a deep breath and delivered the next blow. You claim to stand for tolerance, Ethan. But real tolerance isn't about silencing people you disagree with, it's about respecting their right to believe as they choose. Whether it's a pride pin, a feminist slogan, or a small gold cross. The audience erupted. Some clapped enthusiastically while others sat in stunned silence. Ethan's face hardened. This interview wasn't going as planned. And Karoline was just getting started. The energy in the studio had shifted dramatically. Ethan Caldwell, usually the one in control, now found himself scrambling. He wasn't used to this, his guests typically fumbled, struggled, or danced around his questions. But Karoline Leavitt? She was unfazed. Worse, she was turning the conversation against him. But he wasn't about to give up. Taking a deep breath, he forced a chuckle and leaned back in his chair. All right, Karoline. You make a passionate case, I'll give you that. But let's get real, this isn't just about your necklace. It's about the broader concern that religion is being weaponized in politics. That this administration is pushing Christian values onto a diverse country. Karoline folded her hands, tilting her head slightly. Define weaponized, Ethan. Ethan hesitated for just a second, long enough for her to pounce. You see, she continued, her voice steady, it's fascinating how certain people in the media twist words. When conservatives talk about faith, it's called weaponization. But when the left talks about their beliefs, whether it's climate activism, gender ideology, or race politics, it's considered progress. Ethan's lips parted, but Karoline pressed on. You say the Trump administration is pushing Christian values. But what does that mean exactly? Because last I checked, the principles of Christianity, love, charity, personal responsibility are the same values that built this country. A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience. Ethan let out a huff. Oh, come on, Karoline. The real issue is that religion, specifically Christianity, has been used to justify discrimination. We've seen it time and time again, laws restricting abortion, limiting LGBTQ rights, and more. Karoline nodded slowly as if considering his point. Then she leaned forward. Let me ask you something, Ethan. He raised an eyebrow. You just said Christianity has been used to justify bad things. But couldn't the same be said for nearly any ideology? Haven't people weaponized race to divide this country? Haven't extremists used gender politics to cancel anyone who disagrees with them? Does that mean we should silence those beliefs too? Ethan's jaw tightened. Karoline continued. You claim to fight for diversity, Ethan. But real diversity isn't just about skin color or gender, it's about allowing all voices to be heard, including the millions of Americans who, like me, believe in God. More applause. This time it was louder. Ethan was visibly frustrated now. He glanced at his producers off camera as if looking for an escape. But there was none. Karoline had the momentum. And she wasn't letting go. She looked him in the eye and delivered the final dagger. I wear this cross, Ethan, because it represents who I am. Just like someone might wear a symbol of their heritage, their culture, or their personal beliefs. The difference? When I do it, I'm called divisive. When others do it, they're called brave. Silence. Then thunderous applause. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't how the interview was supposed to go. Karoline smiled politely, sitting back. She had made her point. But the night wasn't over yet. Ethan had one last desperate move left to play. And Karoline was more than ready for it. Ethan Caldwell was drowning and he knew it. The controlled, smug demeanor he had perfected over years of broadcasting was cracking under the weight of Karoline's confidence. She wasn't just countering his arguments, she was dismantling them piece by piece in front of his own audience. But he wasn't out of tricks yet. Taking a deep breath, he forced a smirk. All right, Karoline. You've made your point. But let's talk about real persecution. You claim Christians are being silenced, but let's be honest, Christianity is still the dominant religion in America. It's everywhere. You have churches on every corner, politicians quoting the Bible, even entire businesses refusing service based on religious freedom. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. So tell me, how exactly are Christians being oppressed when they still hold so much power? Karoline chuckled softly, shaking her head. Ah, the classic argument, majority equals privilege. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You say Christianity is everywhere. Sure, there are churches on street corners, just like there are pride flags on corporate logos. Just like there are diversity quotas in hiring policies. But let's talk about real persecution, shall we? Ethan hesitated. Karoline's voice sharpened. How many times have people lost their jobs for standing by their Christian beliefs? How many times have students been told they can't pray in school, but teachers are encouraged to discuss gender identity with kindergartners? How many businesses have been shut down because their owners refuse to violate their religious convictions? The audience murmured. Karoline didn't stop. You ask how Christians are oppressed? Let's flip the script. If someone refuses to bake a cake for a gay wedding, they're called a bigot. But if a Hollywood actor refuses to work with a conservative, they're called brave. If an employee prays at work, they're reprimanded. But if someone kneels for a political cause, they're celebrated. Ethan's smirk faded. Karoline pressed on. The truth is, there's a double standard, Ethan. And you know it. The audience reaction was shifting. Some of Ethan's usual supporters sat quietly, unwilling to clap, but unable to deny what they were hearing. Ethan clenched his jaw. He was losing control, and it showed. His usual strategies, mocking, deflecting, playing the victim card, weren't working. So he went for the lowest blow. Well, he said, feigning thoughtfulness, maybe the reason people push back against Christianity so much is because of the extremists within it. You know, those folks who judge others, claim moral superiority, and, let's be honest, sometimes act downright hateful. The audience tensed. Karoline let out a small, knowing sigh. Ah, and there it is. Ethan blinked. There what is? The guilt by association tactic. She smiled, but there was steel in her voice. You take the worst examples of a group and use them to discredit everyone in that group. Funny, isn't it? If I did that with any other community, I'd be canceled on the spot. A hushed silence fell over the room. Ethan's fingers curled slightly against the table. He had walked right into that one. Karoline leaned forward, her voice unwavering. You see, Ethan, I don't judge people for their beliefs even if I disagree with them. But what I do judge is hypocrisy. And right now, you're proving my point better than I ever could. The audience was no longer just murmuring. Many were nodding. Some were even clapping again. Ethan swallowed hard. His show, his platform, was slipping from his grasp. Karoline sat back, letting the weight of her words settle. But she wasn't done yet, because her final words would be the ones no one, especially Ethan, would forget. Ethan Caldwell was out of options. His go-to tactics, ridicule, deflection, moral grandstanding had all failed against Karoline Leavitt's unwavering confidence. He had underestimated her, and now, in front of millions of viewers, he was paying the price he needed to salvage this. Forcing a smirk, he leaned back in his chair. All right, Karoline, you've certainly got away with words. But let's get real, this administration and people like you aren't victims. You're in power. You have influence. And yet, you're sitting here claiming that people like me, journalists, progressives, are somehow persecuting you. Karoline let out a small chuckle and shook her head. Ethan, this was never about me playing the victim, she said, her voice calm but firm. It's about pointing out the truth. Ethan opened his mouth, but Karoline raised a finger, stopping him. You say I have power because I work for the White House. Fine, but let's look at your side for a second. The media, your media, controls nearly every major network. Hollywood, academia, and even corporations bend over backward to appease leftist narratives. You claim to stand for diversity and inclusion, but what happens when someone in those spaces expresses a conservative belief? She let the question hang. They get blacklisted. They get fired. They get silenced. Ethan's smirk was gone. He stared at her, unsure of how to respond. Karoline continued, her voice steady. So tell me, Ethan, If your side controls the culture, the media, and the corporations, then who's really in power? Silence. The audience was no longer murmuring. Many sat frozen, watching Ethan squirm. And here's the kicker, Karoline added, leaning forward. Despite all that control, despite all the censorship, people are waking up. Americans, real Americans, see through the hypocrisy. They're tired of being told what they can and can't believe. And that's why no matter how many people like you try to shame us, silence us, or mock us, she reached up and lightly touched the gold cross around her neck. We're not going anywhere. Thunderous applause. Ethan looked shaken. His lips parted slightly, but no words came out. His producers were frantically signaling off camera, likely telling him to wrap up before things got worse. Karoline smiled politely and sat back. She had said everything she needed to say. Ethan cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. Well, that's certainly one way to look at it. He chuckled nervously. Karoline Leavitt, everyone. The audience clapped, but the energy had shifted. Ethan Caldwell, the man known for dismantling conservatives, had just been completely dismantled on his own show. As the cameras cut to commercial, Ethan exhaled sharply and rubbed his temples. Karoline simply stood, smoothed her blouse, and gave him a knowing smile. "Thanks for having me, Ethan," she said. And with that, she walked off the set, her gold cross gleaming under the studio lights.